While you're finishing up lunch, we're going to go ahead and get into our Luncheon keynote speaker. You see this? This is Kevin's bio. Kevin said, "Chuck, if you read that, I'm going to break your arm." So I'm not going to read that. He's a humble guy. Kevin Grimes is a great guy. Kevin comes out of Georgia, and he's going to tell you a little bit about his business, I'm sure. But Kevin is also a great friend of the PTACs nationally, and he is one of our favored speakers at our fall and our spring conference, known as APTAC, the Fall and Spring Conference. We have a Sunday optional workshop that the PTACers come, and it's, what is it, Kevin, about 3 or 4 hours?
Yeah, 3 or 4 hours.
It's about 3 or 4 hours, from about 1 to 5 on a Sunday afternoon. And Kevin has done that at least twice, maybe 3 times that I can recall. And he is a favorite speaker of APTAC, and we're lucky to have him here with us today. So without further ado, Kevin Grimes.
How's everyone doing? So, a little bit about myself. First off, I hate it when people read my bio. I'm like many of you, I come to these conferences, and by the time they finish reading it, you've turned off half the room and the other half thinks you're arrogant, so don't read the bio. I just want to know, whenever I go to a conference like this, why should I listen to you, right? What makes you an expert? Why should I give you my attention? For this particular topic, I will say there's 3 reasons. One is that I'm like many of you. And when you say, well, what do you mean you're just like us? You're 6'2". You don't really look like most, but I'm just like you, and let me explain what I mean. My first job out of college was working for a company that had contracts at Kennedy Space Center, Patrick Air Force Base, and NASA. And like many of you, I learned right there on the spot that none of this stuff is taught in college. It's just not. One of the things I'll say that I'm proud of is I'm a big-time nerd. I'm an accountant. I love federal contract, and I love the FAR. And so my first job, I actually called the DCAA. A gentleman spoke about him earlier, the Defense Contract Audit Agency. I called him up and said, hey, guys, this is my first job out of college. I want to do well. I'm in Florida. Do you guys come out and take a look at systems and, give companies like a 21-point inspection? And they said no. I said, man, that's pretty tough. I said, do you guys have any training that someone can go to and kind of learn about this stuff? They said no. I said, well, you know I want to do this right. I'm passionate about it. I'm a veteran. We believe in doing a good job. How can someone like me make sure I do well in this job? And the auditor said, look, the answer is real simple. Just go to this thing called the FAR, read it, it's everything you need to know. I said, okay, being naive. I went, picked it up, read it. About 15 minutes into it, I'm like, man, no way. The thing was like all English, but it read half Greek and Hebrew. Called him back and said, dude, you got to be kidding me. I'm trying to read this thing. I don't understand it. Please help me. And he said, well, nothing I can do. I said, well, I'm just going to get your name, number, write it down. So if we ever get audited, I can at least say on this day, I proactively called and asked for help. Now, where I've come from, that's called CYA, So about 2 weeks later, this is pre-internet, right? 2 weeks later, a box showed up, and it had the DCAA logo all over it. And being an inner city kid from Cleveland, I said to myself, I done told the police on myself, this is the we're coming to get you kid, So I opened it up, and in there was a bunch of CDs. It was 300 hours worth of FAR training. And let me step back and give you some perspective. I don't know if it's still true today, but the DCAA was so serious about federal contracting, they had this thing called the Defense Contract Audit Institute in Memphis, Tennessee. And they knew that no one could understand the FAR, so when they wanted to hire accountants, they made them go to that school, learn their way, and then put them out to go audit you guys. But they also had auditors in Korea and all overseas where they couldn't really get to the schools, so they gave them the distance learning information. And so I went through every last one of those CDs, because I told you I was a nerd, and that's what nerds do, right? So I went through them, and I would wait until I had about 10 good questions, and I would call the auditor, and I'm still about 22, 23. I'm playing that stomp the professor game, And I would call with my 10 questions. One of them would be a dumb question. Now, you know they say there's no such thing as a dumb question. I'm telling you, one of them was a dumb question, you know. 6 or 7 of them were par for the course, but 3 of them would be a really good question where the auditor would say, hey man, let me go ask around and get back with you on that. We played that game for about 3 or 4 months, built some rapport, and when I was done with the curriculum, the auditor said, hey man, you know, you pretty much know this stuff just as well as anybody else. If you ever want to be a DCA auditor, give me a call. So I did what any good American would do. I went and checked the pay scale, see what these guys made. And I saw they started like GS -4, and I was like, nah, I'm going to stay right where I'm at. That's the first part of my bio. One of the reasons I say you should give it some thought is that we've been trained in their ways. I mean, I've never been a federal employee except for the period of time when I was in the Navy on nuclear subs. But, you know, this is what we do. We've never had a client fill a DCA audit ever. We never have. Which brings me to my next story. You probably heard that and said, dude, you must get all the easy audits. I said, okay. So I'm going to tell you a story about one of the audits that we had. Again, another Cleveland background story. I get a call on a Saturday morning. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. A guy speaking in a very heavy Middle Eastern accent. First thought on my mind, must be one of my drunk cousins in Cleveland calling, playing on the phone. You know, hey, let's make Kevin think he's getting some work. So I asked them, did they go through the entrance exam? Did they have to do the ICQ? They said yes. Turns out it was a 100% Iraqi-owned company that was getting ready to do work with the government for a $20 million U.S. Army Corps of Engineer contract. And they had to comply with it. And what I didn't know at the time was, well, so someone from our company had to go there and support the audit. And when I say someone, that means me. Because for some reason, no one wanted to go to Baghdad in 2010, and I don't know why. It was like number 5 on my list of places to go. But what I didn't understand what I got myself into, because they allowed me to book my travel. And I flew into Dubai, and I had it set where the last flight into Dubai was after the flight went to Iraq. So I had to stay overnight in Dubai, and yeah, that stunk. And then I did it coming back as well. I landed in Dubai after the last flight came back to the US. But here's what I didn't realize, it didn't really set in. That morning when I'm getting ready to go to Iraq, I look at my plane ticket a little closer, and it's Iraqi Airways. And as I get on the plane, I'm realizing this isn't a green zone project. I don't have C-130 protection. I'm not flying in with the troops. This is like someone in Baghdad calling someone in the U.S. saying, hey, can you come paint my house? It was a purely commercial project. And it didn't really, see, I'm smart, but I'm stupid too, you know? And it didn't really dawn on me until I was on the plane. And I'm walking down the aisle trying to blend in with everybody, and it just wasn't working. I like to tell that story because there was a language barrier. They kept their money in the ground. And in the ground isn't accounting slang for anything. I mean, they kept their money in the ground. And we still helped them pass their audit, and we still helped them with their proposal. I like to use that example because I guarantee you no one in the room has a system or proposal writing process that bad. And we still help them, okay? And then the third reason, which isn't my favorite, but people seem to enjoy this one, is that since we started doing this in 2009, we've helped companies win and defend over $500 million in federal contracts. So that's my bio. I hope you like that style, right? Was that good? Better bio? Now, I did go to school a little bit, learn a couple things, but that's okay. One thing I'll share with you guys, and I hope you can be patient with me. I'm an atypical accountant. I'm probably one of the most atypical accountants you're ever going to meet. I love this stuff. I love talking about federal contracting, but I know it can be dry, so I'll try to interject some humor and tell some stories. I am not going to read these slides to you, you know, because I hate that. And again, this presentation is written at my level of understanding because I figure if I can understand it, everybody should, because I was always the slow kid in class. But we're going to talk about everything in here. Use this as free consulting. So when the end is over and the mic's passed out, I want you guys to line up and ask all the questions. I'm not going to tap dance. The goal of this session is to actually help you win more federal contracts. And Some people might take issue with the abrasive kind of style a little bit, because I'm not polished. It's just, I'm a kid from Cleveland, went to Georgia, and it was over, subject, verb, agreement, all that stuff, just forget about it. But we're going to go through it, a full knowledge transfer, and I'm actually going to teach you the things that we use in our company. And real quick, our company has 4 GSA schedules, Hub Zone, Service Disabled Vet, 8A, we win prime contracts, and this is the stuff that we actually use in our company that helps make us successful. So let's jump into it. All right. First thing I'm going to talk about is called lagniappe. Lagniappe is a Creole term that means a little something special. Lagniappe is when you go to the restaurant, you order a 10-piece wing, it's getting ready to be closing time, they stick 13 in there. Those 3 are lagniappe. Okay, that's a little something extra. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to throw a little something extra in there, and you're going to know it because you're going to say, I can't believe this dude just told us this. This is good stuff. So there's a lot of lagniappe in here to try to keep it interesting. All right, so first up, competing from the outside lane. Here's why this is called competing from the outside lane. And I'm going to speak about me because I don't want to offend anyone. But for some reason, it feels like to me that when a solicitation hits the street, I'm already too late. Some people use the term wired and all this kind of stuff, but it feels like it's too late. And by the time I learn about the opportunity, sometimes I have like 8 days to respond to it. I know no one can relate to that, but for those of you who can, I'm going to teach you kind of what we do to kind of win from the outside lane. Meaning, it's due in 8 days, you don't have a formal relationship, you don't know the agency, you can do the work, but you don't have familiarization with the agency and their process. So what do? First thing I'm going to tell you that may draw some ire is read the proposal out of order. If you read a federal solicitation in the order that it's submitted, you're going to waste a lot of time. The first thing you should do is read SF 1449, and this is a federal presentation, so if it's state stuff, it may not work. But SF 1449 is the cover page. It tells you the location and the reach. It'll say if it's a small business set aside, if it's a woman-owned procurement, hub-zone procurement. For me, when I'm reading through solicitations, if it's a designation that I can't do, I don't bother reading it. Now, right now, somebody may take exception to that, but the way I see it is, I'm paid to do my own business development. So if I read a solicitation that I can't perform, even if I have friends or colleagues who can do the work, I just did their business development. I'm in business to do my own business development. So when something comes out and I'm looking at it and I can't do it, I move on. SF 1449 saves you some time. Schedule B, price. I want to tell you a story about this one. We had a client who read a performance work statement. The performance work statement had 13 deliverables. They went ahead and started writing the proposal. They even started doing some of the staffing. They called us and said, hey, what do you think? And I said, I think you guys are going to lose a whole lot of money. And they said, well, how do you know that and you haven't even done the pricing? I said, well, this is a one-person contract. And they said, there's no way it's a one-person contract. It has 13 deliverables. I said, yeah, but that's one guy. And they said, well, how do you know that? Schedule B pretty much showed it was one FTE. So they spent all this time trying to staff one resource for 13 deliverables, and it was a one FTE contract. Conversely, if you're a small five-person company, and this contract is for 365 positions, you might want to know that before you start reading, so as you're reading it, you know right away that this is something you're going to need help in. And if you don't have the ability to scale up, maybe you don't want to read it, because these solicitations are 52 pages long, and if you sit there and read through these things and all the attachments and you can't do the work, you've just wasted a lot of time trying to go after work that you can't pursue. And if you're a PTAC client and you're using their bid match service and you have all these alerts coming, you know how hard it is to read every solicitation that comes by you. So Schedule B is the second thing you should read. The next section is the PWS. Once you realize it's something that you can prime, it's a good size that you like, then go through the statement of work. If you've came after the question and answer period, read the questions and answers. And I'm not going to do it, but if I was to ask for a show of hands of how many times someone started writing a proposal, just to read the questions and answers to realize that something you wrote was actually changed or clarified, a good number of hands would go up. So if the questions and answers are out, read those before you start doing any writing. And then take a look at the amendments. The amendments will give you some insight into how flexible the procurement is, and we'll get into this a little bit later. And then Schedule M. Most people write proposals in response to the performance work statement or the statement of work. That is the wrong way to write a proposal. You're supposed to write a proposal in response to Schedule M. And we're going to talk about this in greater detail. So this isn't an information session. All of these bullets we're going to drill down into them. But one of the common mistakes people make is, again, they write the technical narrative in response to the PWS when it really needs to be in response to Schedule M. Lastly, Schedule L. Schedule L is the most fun part of the proposal. It's the part that usually comes out and it reads this way. Must be 25 pages, 1-inch margins, 12-point font, Time New Romans, needs to be 3-hole punched and emailed. And you read that and you say, how can something be 3-hole punched and emailed? And that's usually like your first question, right? But you have to read it because you can be disqualified for submitting something in a conflict with Schedule L. So this is the overview. This is what we're going to talk about. And now let's go deep into it. Schedule B. Schedule B looks this way. If you jump to Schedule B, it'll typically tell you there's project manager, there's one person, project director, one person, support assistant, one person, technical assistant, 7 lot. That lot, if you see it in federal terms, it just means 7 total. And then the acquisition analyst. If this is your company, substitute those labor categories for what your team does, and based on that, you can have a rough estimate of how much you think that procurement is actually worth. If there's an incumbent and they have a GSA schedule, you can pretty much populate this based on their GSA schedule and kind of get a feel for what the incumbent's pricing may be. So again, before you start actually writing anything, go to Schedule B and understand what's the size of the project. For us, example, unless it's exactly what we do, and based on our size, we try to stay around $5 million and under per each year. Because anything larger than that, again, unless it's exactly what we do, we may have a hard time ramping up in a short amount of time. We may have to bring in a subcontractor. So again, know what your sweet spot is. So this gives us an indication whether it's our sweet spot or not. Another example, some people will pursue a 6-month contract or an IDIQ contract. And when they wrote it, they didn't know it was a small duration. And I want to share with you the challenges in that to be mindful of. We had a 6-month contract, and it wasn't exactly what we do. And around month 4, some of the people started jumping off because it's a 6-month contract. Do you know how hard it is to go in and find someone willing to work for 2 months? It's a challenge. IDIQ contracts is where the government tells you, we want these labor categories, give us the pricing as if it's a full-time position, but we're only going to call you when we need you. And if you don't read the contract carefully, if you don't write your proposal careful enough, it may have a 5-day lead time, which means they can call you on Monday and they want someone out there the following Monday. And if you don't have the bench strength, it might be hard to find these people in 5 days. So even though it's exactly what you do, if you don't have the ability to have people sitting around or you don't have, excess folks, some of those contracts you may want to pass on until you get a little bit larger and you can support IDIQ contracts, or you have internal personnel who can jump off and on contracts. Again, Schedule B gives you so much insight into whether you should pursue the opportunity or not. Next, the PWS. This is my favorite part. Again, before you write it, read it twice. What a lot of people will do is they'll read it one time, and while they're reading it, they're trying to create an outline as to how they're going to write it. Don't do that just yet. The first thing you should do is read the PWS twice. The first time you're reading over it to make sure that there is no technical discriminators or anything that disqualifies you from the project. Let me give you some examples of what I mean by discriminators. If it says that the employees will be required to have a secret or top secret clearance, or the company has to have a facilities clearance, and you don't have one, and you ask the question, will they provide sponsorship, and the answer is no, don't bother writing it. If you don't have a facilities clearance, you're not going to get it by the time the proposal's due. If this contract is for IT and it requires a CMMI level 3 certification and you don't have it, leave it alone. Again, if you keep reading the whole thing and then go find a company that has the security clearance, has a CMI, they can say, thank you for bringing this to my attention, but we actually don't need you for it. Again, you've just done business development for somebody else. Just sharing. The second time you read it, once you read through it the first time and there's no real technical discriminators, the second time you're going to read it, and then you're going to try to figure out what percentage of the work you can do. So in essence, the first time you're reading it to see if you can prime it. So just go through it, make sure it's something you can do. Second time, what of the different deliverables, can you do all of them? Will you have to identify a partner? At this point, you can start thinking about other people because you can do most of the work yourself. And it sounds kind of harsh, and I'll give you the analogy for this one. If you're a small and growing company, it's almost like something that I heard on an airplane. When I was first riding airplanes, and they said if something happens on the airplane and you have a small child, put the oxygen mask on yourself and then put it on the kid. I thought, man, that's some bad parenting right there. You know, put it on your kid first, make sure your kid is good, and then take care of yourself. But the reason you put the mask on yourself first is because if you pass out, you're going to die and your kid's going to die too. This is the same kind of concept. When you're going through these solicitations and you're trying to grow your business, look for the work that you can do first, and once you identify it, then bring in partners. So that's kind of a little harsh, but that's the concept between reading it first, reading it second time. And let me take one caveat, because I didn't give you one disclosure. In federal contracting, the right to win ratio is about 1 in 7, 1 in 8. And right is WRITE. Meaning in federal contracting, you pretty much have to write 7 or 8 quality proposals in order to win one. I just saved somebody's job, I know that. Because a lot of times what we do is you write the first one, you'll lose it. The person will write the second one, they'll lose it. Write the third one, they'll lose it. And you'll go, this person can't write worth a nickel, and you let them go. It's not the case. 1 in 7, 1 in 8 is about average. 1 in 4, 1 in 5 is really good. That's blazing. Even the large companies like Boeing, Northrop Grumman, they kind of compete against each other. They just can't win them all. 1 in 4, 1 in 5, you have a fantastic and phenomenal proposal writer. Now, the challenge for small business owners when your proposal writer is now winning 1 in 2, 1 in 3. Because at 1 in 2, 1 in 3, typically one of two things happens. Either that person is going to ask for a raise and more money than you're willing to pay them, because clearly if they're winning 1 in 2, 1 in 3, you have the money to pay them, right? Just more. Or they're going to go, well, I'm writing all these, I can start my own company and just staff them. So I'm just trying to share with you the thing there is when you get someone who's that good, you may want to start thinking about incentivizing them to keep them engaged. But this proposal is designed to get, this class is designed to get you down to that 1 in 4, 1 in 5. Our right to win ratio is 1 in 3.4. And this is the methodology that we use. So I want to just share with you that for us, we win about 1 in every 3 things that we write because we're very particular about what we write, okay? All right, so PWS, when you're reading the PWS, there are certain questions, and PWS is the same as a statement of objectives, statement of deliverables, those kind of things. The first question you want to ask are the required solutions proprietary? Again, if this solicitation is asking for a phone system and they want you to use a Unix BQ57, well, they want a Unix BQ57. The question you're going to ask is, well, this particular phone is a suitable substitute. Can we use this instead? If the answer comes back no, well, you kind of know it's not a flexible procurement, or they have a specific agency need. You want to ask, are there any personnel requirements that are rare? And this is politically correct. I'm going to take some of the edge off of that. True story. We saw a contract. It was exactly what we do. Wanted to write it. It was the right size. We had to pass performance. We went to the key man section, the key personnel, and it said this person must have a master's degree 10 years of experience. Of those 10 years, 4 must be DOD, and of those 4, 1 must be Army. So we asked the question, hey, you know, this is a security contract. If they've done this for the Navy, Air Force, Army, is that acceptable? They said, nope, has to be the Army. I'm here to tell you they know that guy. That person is sitting somewhere, and that person's written into the contract. So either you know who that guy is, and you can find him and get him on your team and put him in a proposal, or you might know right now you may not want to write that one. I'm just sharing, you know, a lot of you are going to go ahead and write it and kind of learn what I've already learned, but you want to see if there's some requirements in there that are very rare, okay? It's politically correct. Next one, are there any requests that are limiting or creating an unlevel playing field? And again, there's nothing wrong with this. In many respects, the government has the right to ask what it's asking for. This is an example where a contract may be a help desk contract, and it's requiring an ISO certified company. And you read through it and you ask the question, hey, this is help desk. We're just walking people through. Does the company have to be ISO certified? They may even have CMMI certified. Say, we're not doing any development. Is this certification pertinent? And the agency says, yep, it is pertinent. We're not taking it out. Well, you kind of got to ask yourself, what's your take on that? So again, these are real world discussions. I know about 5, 6, 7 people are going to pull me aside and say, hey, man, that never happens. And say, okay, that's cool. But these are the things that we look at when we're reading the solicitation, the performance work statement. The concept that we're asking ourselves is how open and how level is the playing field? And yes, I know the FAR ensures a fair and level playing field. Yes, I know that. All right. Question and answers. These are questions that everyone needs to ask. The first question always, let me step back. There are some people who are afraid to ask questions because they believe that if they ask the question, it makes the agency feel as if you don't really know the work or you don't know what you're doing. That's actually the wrong thing. We teach at the Contract and Education Academy in Georgia Tech. We teach contracting officers, the Con 170, so they can get the DWIA level 1, 2, 3 certs. And the whole point of that is to make sure that the solicitation is free from errors, not ambiguous, and more importantly, it's protest proof. They want to put out a clean and fair procurement. They really do. The Q&A period sometimes helps them tighten up the requirements because the contracting officer is the one putting the procurement out, but they may or may not be the technical expert. More so than not, they're not the technical expert. So they can't really understand or be able to detect errors in the statement of work. They need industry to go through that period and ask questions to get it clear. Now, I'll tell you, if you're the incumbent, you don't want to ask any questions because in theory, you're already there. You should know what they want. Why would you tip your hand to everyone else? Just saying. But for those of you who are from the outside looking in, you're not the incumbent, you should ask as many questions as you can to glean as much information about that procurement as you possibly can. But the first question you should always ask is there an incumbent? Was there a previous contract number? Reason being is, give you an example. This is a contract that's coming out, it's a recompete. It's for 10 IT personnel. This contract was issued 4 years ago for 10 IT personnel. If you have the contract number, you can Google it, find it in FedBizOps or FPDS, and you can actually see what the winning bid was from that company 4 years ago. If it's the exact same, and you can pull the statement of work as well. If it's the exact same statement of work 4 years later, same incumbent, same headcount, how much difference do you think the price is going to be? So if their price was like $4 million 4 years ago, and the best you can do is $8 million, and its lowest price technically acceptable, my question to you is why write it? Now, if their price is $4 million and you're around $4 million, but you can probably get down to 3.2, 3.4, now you kind of know what you're working with. Now, granted, yes, if this is an oil contract or a gas contract, prices have changed. But for the most part, when you're talking about services or commodities, you can pretty much gauge what the inflation and prices are going to be. So you always want to ask those questions. Now, here's the dirty tactic. Once you know who the incumbent is, you can go into Career Builder or Monster if you have access to the system, put the company's name in, And you might be able to find who the existing employees are if they're looking for jobs or not happy. You might be able to find some former employees, call them up, interview them, ask them what's going on, and get some intel on it. That tactic may seem a little dirty, right? A little dirty. But that's what they kind of do to you. So when they know that your contract's coming up for renewal in 4 years, they've already got a strategy. They've gone through FPDS. They've already met with the contracting officer. They've already done capability briefings. They're going to compete against you. And they're going to gather all the intel that they can. The companies that are 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4, 1 and 5, they gather all the intel that they can. When I was in Patrick Air Force Base down there with the NASA contracts, it was so competitive that some of the large businesses actually did what was called dumpster diving. And has anyone ever heard of dumpster diving? Okay, you see a few hands up? That's where they would actually wait for you to throw your trash away and actually take your trash, hoping to get version 1, version 2, version 3 of your proposal, seeing your key personnel resumes. Again, I'm not saying you have to go through that extreme. I mean, typically if you just get the company's name, put it in Career Builder, you can find 2 or 3 pissed off people that would love to come work for you and stick the screws to the man. I'm just sharing. This is a tactic. And you can only engage this tactic and deploy this tactic if you know who the incumbent actually is. Otherwise, you're just shooting at stars. And the government has to tell you, too. That's the beauty of it. They have to tell you. You also want to see if any technical ambiguities were clarified. If they came back and said, hey, you're right, this doesn't have to be CMMI level 1, it doesn't have to be ISO, you're right, as long as they come from the DoD, everything's fine, it gives me a warmer fuzzy. It seems like this is going to be a good thing. And next, were any of the technical requirements expanded or reduced? Again, you just want to look at all the questions, the ones you asked, the one everyone else asked, and see how accommodating the contracting activity was in terms of making adjustments and giving people latitude to create other opportunities. Now, if you get one back and it's all yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, I mean, you know you've read those, right? I'll tell you a war story. We submitted one to an agency and said, is there an incumbent? And it was best value. We're going to talk about best value later. But we said, is there an incumbent? The response we received was, no, there is no incumbent, but there is someone doing the work. Didn't know how to take that one. So, but again, ask the questions, gauge the responses, and kind of see what's going on. The other one was an extension of time formally requested. This is kind of an art form. Some companies and good proposal writers, they'll write 77 questions. And they're really not seeking clarity per se. They actually know that if they ask 77 questions, the government has to answer all 77 questions. And they do it as a tactic to try to get the due date extended. Because it will end with something like, and until we get the answers to these questions, we can't really begin to form the technical response. For that reason, would you please provide us with an extension? I'm not going to ask who's ever written that or who's ever read it, but it happens. So you typically ask for an extension of time, and sometimes it's granted, sometimes it's not. We actually had an encounter with the contracting officer. It was great. It was hilarious. Because they knew we were writing these questions, and we asked good questions, but we asked some fluff ones too. And when we got to the part of, can we get an extension of time, the actual response was, good try, no. So what some of the more seasoned folks will tell you about federal contracting and the FAR is that it's a rule book. It's the rules of the game. Know the rules, know the game, play it, and every now and then you'll get those moments where you have the humor from both sides because they see you playing the game or they're playing the game, and you kind of have a good chuckle because it happens. But again, typically, there's no harm in asking for an extension of time. The worst they can tell you is no, okay? Proposal amendments, we kind of beat this one to death. All right, so here we go. First one, this is a lanyap, a eureka moment. Now, I call these eureka moments because this is my hope, and I'm not saying it's going to work, but one of the things that I want to do today, and our team talked about before I came, was actually giving you real-world stuff, knowledge versus information. This one says, strive not to be a success, but rather to be of value. And I want to talk about this one because this is where like the contracting people who may not have liked me a little bit, they might warm up to me a little bit here. The first Einstein moment is, what is the real need? This is what separates the 1 and 2, 1 and 3 proposal writers from everyone else. They ask the question, what is the real need? Read the proposal at a high level and try to understand what the end user is trying to accomplish. And believe me, I'm gonna get a little deeper. The number 2 complaint, and because we teach the Contracting Academy, we meet a lot of contracting officers and cores, we ask questions. Their number 2 complaint is that the offerer could not see the big picture. Ask the question, why is the agency requesting this particular service? And let me give you an example. This is the example I'm gonna give you. A solicitation came out, best value for fencing. For fencing, but running fencing. And my question was, how could somebody have best value to a fence? That's clearly a lowest price, technically acceptable kind of thing. You specify how long the fence is going to be, how high it needs to be, where the gates are, call it a day. But the government left it as a best value. So immediately some people thought, oh, they must know who they want, and best value is leaving the door open so if someone has a higher proposal, they can give it to who they want to give it to. It's the school of thought. But someone actually went to the agency and said, why are you even asking for fencing to begin with? It was in some part of Montana or Wyoming. It was up in the mountains, didn't really get it. The agency said the reason why we're asking for fencing is because over the last 3 to 6 months, we've had a series of maulings where the bears, came down and had a human interaction. Didn't kill anybody, but let's put the fence up so they don't. So the client went and wrote a proposal. They weren't the lowest bidder, but they won the best value contract. And they were an outsider. They weren't even in the hemisphere of the hunt. What they did with the fence is every so many feet, they put these openings that were big enough for a person to get through, but it was too small for a bear to get through. That way, if someone was trapped on the other side of the fence, they could actually run out the fence. They actually created best value on a fence. Everyone else in that solicitation, you know what they were doing? They were off trying to go to manufacturers to see where they get the parts the cheapest. They were out trying to see if there were suitable substitutes, looking for inventory. They were trying to find contractors who could lay the fence cheap. They were doing what was in the statement of work versus asking, why does the statement of work even exist? It's crazy, isn't it? A fencing contract. So that's the number 2 complaint, is that people respond to these requirements without understanding the agency's need. So again, for us, if we don't really understand why the agency is asking for it, we may not write it, especially if there's other things that we can be writing where we have a little more intel. And you can call the contracting officer, or if you can get to the core, and say, typically before the solicitation hits the street, in the forecast stage, and ask them, why is this requirement coming up? It's a new requirement. What drove the need? At that point in time, they may actually tell you that, if you have the gumption to actually go do the research, pick the phone up and call them. It gives you a competitive edge. Make no assumptions while reading the performance work statement. Make no assumptions. Ask the questions in the Q&A period. Let them tell you no. Sometimes they'll tell you, this was addressed on page 4. This was addressed on page 8. Again, ask the questions, make no assumptions. So the first thing that I want you to know is try to understand why the requirement exists. That alone will increase your success rate, particularly on best value contracts. Up next, we talked about Schedule M, the evaluation methodology. There's only 2 ways the government can award federal contracts. Best value, which is trade-off, and they read kind of funky these days. They'll read something like this. The award will be made to the offerer whose combination of technical and price prospects represents the best value to the government. Some of them read, this will go to the offerer whose proposal is most advantageous to the government. This proposal will go to the offerer who has the best proposal, price, past performance, and technical, all considered. However, price is not as important as technical and past performance. They read a bunch of different funky ways. all that means best value. Lowest price technically acceptable, it is what it is. Lowest price, technically acceptable. What you're going to encounter is that there's a lot of kind of, I won't say bad blood, but on the contracting community, a lot of people right now are having some issue with best value because they believe that it's the government's way of putting their procurement out, and if they really want someone to win or the incumbent to stay, they can award it to that incumbent because in the FAR, the contracting officer's judgment is not protestable. I don't necessarily agree with that. I understand people who feel that way. You can ask the question in the Q&A period. Is there a reason this is best value versus lowest price technically acceptable? I'll give you good examples and bad examples. Good example of best value is when you're talking about something in the space program. It's for the astronaut safety, and let's say the safety rating needs to be a 95 out of 100. One company puts a proposal in for $10 million, they're at 95. Another company puts a proposal in at $11 million, and they're at 99.8. The government may say, you know, for that extra $1 million, to go from 95% to 99.8, we're talking about astronaut lives, astronaut safety, it's worth paying the extra $1 million for it. That's a good use of best value. A bad use of best value is when a ladder comes out. It's a ladder contract for 10 ladders, and they want best value, and they specify it's a 6-foot ladder, has to be aluminum. You know, how can you put best value in a ladder? Or the contract is to run so many feet of cable for networking or to do help desk. At that point, best value starts to be kind of tricky. But even in that scenario, you still have to think about the fencing contract, because had you asked everyone in the room who did fencing, they would have said to you, this agency clearly wants someone and you can't put best value in the fence. So I just want to give you kind of the difference between the two and how your writing style may need to approach them. If it's lowest price technically acceptable, you have to be the lowest price. No other way around it. If you have to be best value, you have room to be creative. Here's where I want to tell you something I think PTACs and SBDCs and SBAs have been trying to tell you for years. Sometimes your best marketing tool is a well-written losing proposal. Let me share this with you. We saw a proposal that came out, true story, and it was on the GSA website. It came out on a Monday. They wanted this stuff on Thursday. The solicitation was loaded with errors, and it came out of LPTA. I looked at it, I read it, and I said, you know what? I think they have someone in mind already just because of the way it was kind of worded. But it was an agency that I wanted to do business with, and it was work that we could do. So I went through and asked a whole bunch of questions in the Q&A period to try to get an extension of time. And they said, nope, 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 nope. And one of the things that happened was the performance work statement required like a senior network engineer. The Schedule B made no mention of a senior network engineer. So one of my questions was, how are we supposed to provide a senior network engineer when there's no avenue to price it? And they said, no, there's no conflict there. After the answer came back, I had to then respond, please go to page 7, paragraph 4. This is where he referenced the senior network engineer. Please go to page 5, it's not there. They came back and they clarified. They just threw something out on the streets. And my suspicion was that they just didn't want anybody to pick up on it. Only the one company would bid on it. But that's okay. They had to extend the time because the proposal had some ambiguities in it. And we wrote the proposal. Now we felt like we weren't going to win it. But the beauty of a lowest price technically acceptable procurement is that the only way an agency cannot award a contract to you if you're lowest price is to find you technically unacceptable. We wrote that proposal so well that we were found technically unacceptable because the agency they required some PMPs, 4-day project, had to find, 4-day period. They called the Project Management Institute to verify that all the folks had PMPs, which is a stretch. I mean, normally the government doesn't go that deep into something. So we didn't win it. We were disqualified. We were $20,000 lower, but we were disqualified for being lowest price technically acceptable. Mind you, if we were $20,000 higher, it could have been, hey, you guys wrote a good proposal, but you weren't the lowest price, so on and so forth. We did the debrief. And again, I encourage everyone, always do the debrief. Even when you win, do the debrief. Because you may learn that you won, but barely. But we did the debrief, and we called and we said, hey, let's talk to the agency. And we got on the phone and said, hey, this is CFO Leasing, how are you guys doing? They go, oh, we know who you are. I said, hey, we play, you understand the rules in the game. We're not going to protest. They don't want to fear a protest. It's just not what we do. But we said, hey, we feel bad. We weren't found technically acceptable. We thought we could do good work. Is this an agency that we should pursue? And they actually said some things, pretty nice. They said, hey, oh no, we know who you are. You guys can do the work. We see you can do the work. It's unfortunate that one of your guys lied on their resume, whatever the case may be. They said, but we noticed you're a HubZone company. We've got about 4 or 5 HubZone things coming out, and we want you to bid on that stuff. Reason being is that the hardest person to get a hold of in the federal contracting community is typically the technical reps and the COTARs. But in order to find you technically unacceptable, that person has to sit down with your proposal and actually find something. So based on reading it, they saw the past performance, they saw the approach, saw the work. That particular opportunity wasn't for us, but there were other things out there. Now, I'm not saying there was any foul play in that. I'm not saying it at all. But what I'm saying to you is this. If you write a really great proposal, it will get read by people in that agency that you typically won't have access to. Even when you come to these trade shows, it's not too often that you bump into a contracting officer who has like an unlimited warrant and the core. It's not often you bump into those people. So again, the concept here is write a well-written proposal because it really is your best marketing tool. And let's talk about that. When you write a proposal, typically they read this way. It'll say these are the scoring factors. So we said write to Schedule M, not to the performance work statement. This is what we mean, and this is what the better proposal writers do. This solicitation said factor 1 is technical approach, 15%. Factor 2, production experience and past performance, 15%. Quality control, 45%. Capability of key personnel, 20%. And facilities and equipment, 5%. This is the scoring for this procurement. So let's say this proposal has a 20-page limit, and you wrote 17 pages. You now have 3 pages left. What do you write about? Well, we have one company that had about 2 or 3 PhDs. So they spend 3 pages writing about their people who are PhDs, how they teach at MIT and Stanford, and they're the greatest things since sliced bread. That's great. You spent 3 pages writing about something that's 20% of the score. Another person spent 3 pages with illustrations and talking about how great their facility is, state-of-the-art kind of complexes, labs, and all those wonderful things. They spent 3 pages writing about something that's 5% of the score. Another company spent 3 pages writing about their production, how they've had 0 safety issues, 0 defects, how they deliver on time. They spent 3 pages talking about quality control, which is 45% of the score. The government just doesn't arbitrarily slap these ratios in there. It's in there because the core has a reason for that. This contract could have been something where a lot of stuff was going back, people were slipping, whatever the case may be. One of the challenges that we see is that a lot of times we all have pride in our business, which we should, and when proposal writing time comes, we write about what we want to write about, not about what the government's asking for. You have to tell the government what they want to hear, not just what you want to tell them. Again, that's one of the differences between the 1 and 8, 1 and 2s, especially when the owner, and I'm an owner of a company, I'm talking about us, when we're the ones doing the work, we always believe we're the best at it, and for some reason that always goes through the proposal. Even when the proposal doesn't require resumes, we spend 2 pages sticking our resume in there. Write about what the government wants. Now, next one. It says if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. This is the #1 pet peeve of the federal agencies. #1 pet peeve. Here's a requirement in the statement of work. It says, section 5.1, review submitted invoices for accuracy and completeness. So this is an accounting contract where the agency is hiring folks to actually process invoices. One of the things the agency is asking the company to do is to review submitted invoices for accuracy and completeness. Here's the anticipated, what most companies will write in this proposal is, we will process invoices in accordance with the government's requirements. Has anyone ever did that? Just put a "we will" on front of it. That's the majority of responses. It's just a restatement of the target with a "we will" on the front of it. Some companies are a little more elaborate. They'll write, we have experience processing invoices. We've done it for these 17 agencies. We're the worldwide leader in doing it. Our staff is trained and prepared to write these invoices, to review invoices. This is what we do. We're your best vendor of choice. But then there's the 6%, the top 6%. They will write, upon invoice arrival, the accounting clerk 3 will review the invoices for accuracy and completeness. All invoices will be checked to ensure the following items are present and accurate on each invoice: contract number, remittance address, unit quantity, price, date. Goes on and says, in the event an invoice is not complete and or accurate, the invoice will be rejected within 7 calendar days, and the vendor will be notified in accordance with the agency's policy. In the event the agency does not have a current policy, we will contact the vendor via email if an email address is on file or by mail. The number one complaint of contracting officers and cores is that when the company submits their proposal, they do not explain how they're actually going to do it. They just say they will do it, or we have experience doing it, but you never said how. And in a best value contract or a lowest price technically acceptable contract, that's one of the easiest ways to be disqualified. It wasn't technically acceptable because you couldn't demonstrate, or you didn't demonstrate, how the requirement would be fulfilled. It's the difference between, again, 1 and 2, 1 and 3, versus 1 and 7, 1 and 8. Next one, carefully consider the key personnel. Read the education requirements, the skills, and exceed them, especially on the best value trade-off contract. Again, I'm telling you that you only have to meet the criteria, but on something that's best value, or if there's an incumbent already there, offer something that you think is going to be superior to what they already have. Make sure you label the people who are key, tailor their resumes to no more than 2 pages, and understand that whomever you staff as a key person will not be able to lead a contract for 6 months. A lot of times, the subject matter expert in a small company is the owner. The owner will write themselves in as the key person, and then they win the contract, and they want to send somebody else there. You can't do that. You can't do that. Einstein said we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. One of the worst mistakes people write in proposals is they actually write, we will use the incumbent workforce to leverage their experience and past performance. Their whole approach to staffing is we're going to use the incumbent's people. That's a horrible approach. It's a horrible approach. 2 reasons why that's the worst approach you could possibly have. First one, how do you know the agency wants them back? The agency could be at a position where they don't want the incumbent back, the solicitation's on the street, they put it out best value just so they could have latitude to get the incumbent out of there, and you just wrote a proposal saying we're going to bring back all the very people you're trying to get rid of. It's number one. Number two, what if that particular company decides to reassign all their incumbents? So just because they lose the contract, they do not have a commitment to give them your people. If it's an executive order contract or Service Contract Act project, you have an obligation to extend the job, but the contractor does not have to give you the people. And let me explain how this works with some of the more sophisticated companies and the companies that are kind of dirty. What they'll do is take their incumbents, their employees, and say, look, guys, we just lost this contract. This company beat us out on price, so the only way that they're going to be able to hire you is to offer you lower pay. What we're going to do is keep all of you guys on the same pay. We're going to have you come in the office, do some training, but for the first month, we're just going to cover you guys' salary and all those kind of things. Here's the problem for the person who wrote this. The contract is supposed to start October 1st. October 7th, they can't staff it because they thought they were going to use the incumbent's people. October 14th rolls around, they still can't staff it. Now the contracting officer in court is going, look, where are the people? So now they're back calling the incumbent going, hey, you know, we can't do this without your people. Now the incumbent can say, hey, I tell you what, give us 40% of the work, we'll give you all the people. These are the people that we want, these are the people you can have. Or they can sit there and let you default. We've seen this at the CDC happen time and time again, where someone thought they were going to win the contract. They might have had one or two key people, gave no consideration to how they were going to staff the non-key positions, just assuming the incumbent was going to give them the people. Worst mistake. Write the proposal as if you need no help at all. Go out and find qualified people, and then when you write your proposal, say, look, dear government, we can staff this contract day one with our own people. However, if incumbent personnel are available, we will certainly consider them if they have the past performance and they meet in our pay structure. That's how you write it. You can be disqualified for your staffing plan because, again, the incumbent has no obligation to give you their people. Lastly, instructions or offers. Follow the instructions perfectly. Do not make mistakes. Simple things. The proposals due at noon. Make sure it's noon Eastern, Central, Mountain Time. If it's 10 pages, leave it at 10 pages. Email the right address. If the proposal says do not include price information in a technical volume, do not put the price information in a technical volume. Give the government everything that they ask for. And also remember, submit your proposal. Because if you do not submit your proposal, you have no grounds to protest. And again, I'm not a big fan of protesting. I think in my years of doing this, we've only protested one thing in our entire career. And that was where an agency copy and pasted the statement of work out of a company's website. It was just too crazy. But submit your proposal, because in the event that this company, it's a small business procurement or a woman-owned procurement, the company wins it, and you know they're not woman-owned, you can protest that. You can protest on the basis of designation. If it's a small business set aside and you know this company's a large business, or their parent company's a large business, they just created this shell company just to go after it, you can protest on the basis of size standard. But you can't protest if you don't submit the proposal. Any questions? So that was it. I hope it was somewhat insightful and honest, albeit maybe brutal. But go back one. All right. So it's Q&A period. I promise if you have questions, I'll answer them honestly. Won't give you the politically correct party line answer. Yep. It's on the stand right there behind the guy. You had a question back there? No? Okay. All right, well, no questions. You got a question? The question was if you want to copy this PowerPoint presentation, how could you do that? We emailed this to Chuck. What we can do is put it in the PDF, send it back to him, and you can have this for free. Just you can have it. And again, this is our true methodology. This is exactly how we approach proposals. Oh, there we go. I knew it was one question. I knew it was one. Yep.
So you mentioned you do like 3.4 to 1 in your metric. What other metrics do you track to know that you're being efficient and effective in your proposal?
All right. So the other one is the question was well, you heard it. In federal contract, I'm going to give you the long answer. My grandma has this saying, sometimes the longest way around is the safest way home. So I'm going to take the long way around. I meet a lot of small businesses, and they say to me, we're not winning a lot of federal work, or we're having a hard time in the federal space. My first question to them is, how many proposals are you writing? Because if you're not writing, they're just not going to pick the phone up and call you. So the first metric is we try to put out, as odd as it may sound, we try to put out at least 12 proposals per quarter. Because from where we sit, that's 36 going out a year. And even if we're in the 1 in 9 category, that means we should get 4 per year. And again, we're not going after stuff that's far-fetched. I mean, we're not trying to build the next space shuttle. We're not trying to build nuclear subs. We're going after things that we can do that's within our sweet spot. But the key metric, in my opinion, in growing a federal business is how many proposals are you actually pumping out the door on a quarterly basis? You liked that answer, didn't you? I saw that, yeah. All right, Chuck. I think they're ready to go home, man. Do I think rambling? No, I don't. I actually think, now, I'm from Georgia. My team is the Hurricanes. They kind of stink it up a little bit. But I actually think Utah is going to actually take it. And I'm not saying it because I'm here in the state. I'm not saying that. I think you guys were screwed royally in 2007. And it's just a matter of time before one of those non-major kind of programs actually takes it all. A lot of people thought it might have been Boise State or TCU or something to that effect, even though TCU is in the Big 12 now. But I think this is Utah's year. I think you're overdue, and I think you got the team to do it. Now, had the Hurricanes not lost to Florida State, I would have said it's going to be Florida State, Miami and Utah, and you never know who's going to do it. But you guys have a good squad this year. Yep. Sure. It's free consulting, man. I'm free consulting.
So you kind of told us how you started, and I'm just trying to get started in this government contracting stuff. So I've heard a lot of other people's, what they say, what's the most important thing to get started. So I'd like to ask you that question today. What would be your advice for somebody to get started? Okay,
thank you. Couple things. We don't try to be everything to everybody. There's a lot of companies that go out there and they say, yes, we can do that. You ask them, can you put this on Mars? They'll say, sure, we did Jupiter yesterday. I mean, we're not one of those companies. We kind of targeted the 2 or 3 things that we really thought we could be the best at. We targeted training, we targeted management consulting, and we kind of targeted IT and the structures around it. I'll tell you didn't ask it this way, but I'll tell you the things that helped accelerate us. One was we adopted the philosophy of helping people. The reason why I'm here is to help folks. There's a good chance that maybe in the next year or two, 4 or 5 companies in here perhaps may be competing against us on the same opportunity, using our strategy against us, researching our contracts to beat us, calling our employees, trying to hire them. But that's okay. I mean, there's enough work for everyone. And then secondly, I would encourage every small business to approach the large business process differently from everyone else. And let me explain what I mean, and take it or leave it. A lot of people get their designations, and they go to a large business, and they say to them, we're in 8A, we can help you meet your goal. We're a hub zone, we can help you meet your goal. I see you're not meeting your goals, let me help you meet your goals. There's no shortage of small businesses. They'll tell you that they can't find a good 8A, but you can go in the dynamic small business search on the SBA site and find anything you're looking for. That's a long road and a long process. What I recommend companies do is when you actually win work, give a large business some of your work. As crazy as that may sound, it's the fastest path to building a relationship. Let me explain what I mean. This is exactly what we did. We had a contract opportunity out in DC. It was for 15 positions. We could realistically do all 15 positions on our own. But there was a large top 50 federal prime that we were trying to partner with and do work with. We called them up and said, hey, this is a hub zone requirement. You guys really can't prime it. This isn't something you can do. But I think these 5 positions might be in your sweet spot. Why don't you come on board as our sub? It helps us because the government sees us with a large prime contractor, which is different from what everybody else small was proposing. Plus, it gives them work in an area that they're trying to expand into and with an agency that they may not be doing work with. So we teamed, they were our sub. So now, when they go back and they're trying to build their team, and the reason they're trying to build their team is because the SBA put the hammer down, and said, you just can't say you're going to get small businesses. Write them out by name, who the small businesses are that's going to be on your team. They picked the phone up and called us and said, hey, you guys gave us some work. The SBA wants us to actually spell out who our hub zone is. We're going to use you guys. Again, there's no shortage of companies begging large businesses for work. There is a shortage of small businesses who are helping those large businesses tap into that 49% market. That helped us build a lot of relationships with a lot of big businesses and get invited into a lot of meetings that small businesses typically don't get invited in. But again, that's 1 and 2, 1 and 3 again. So you didn't ask that question, but we just pride ourselves in giving you more than what you asked for to land you out. And big businesses appreciate that, by the way. When you come to them and say, hey, look, we're targeting $20 million in hub zone contracts this year. We want to put $4 or $5 million, your way. Man, they listen. Just one man's opinion. Just one man's opinion. That's it? All right.
Now you know why our National PTAC Association has him back year after year after year. He's that good. Another round of applause for Kevin. Kevin, on behalf of the Utah PTAC, a little token of our appreciation for you, a little gift card.
Well,
thank you so much.
Shouldn't have.
You bet, buddy.
But I'll take it.
Thank you. As we kind of conclude, we hope that if you want to visit the booth holders one last time and do a little bit of networking, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise, we thank you for coming today. We thank you for your support, and we'll see you next year. Take care.